A number of structures lend themselves to the sprang technique. Perhaps the best known is the interlinking structure. It looks like chain link fence, and it's quite well known for how stretchy it is sideways. The problem with this structure, when we're talking about a no frame method, is that this structure really needs to curl at first, and that gets frustrating when you don't have a frame. So I opted instead to show you the interlacing technique, which lays flat. I showed you the over one, under one interlacing, and these instructions are quite straightforward, and it gives you a nice balanced weave cloth. The problem is that your tension for those two directions of threads has to be perfect for your tension to be perfect. And a number of beginners have difficulty getting a satisfying look, nice even cloth. So I think what you might like instead, I've also prepared instructions for this over two, under two interlacing structure. This structure, it's not as stretchy as the interlinking structure, but it's much more tolerant of very slight unevennesses in the tension, and it gives you a much nicer looking cloth, far easier. The instructions have a little bit of a wrinkle, a little bit more complex than the over one, under one, but I think you can handle this. For this project, you'll want an even number of threads. Here's my set of 5 loops, 10 threads, and notice that the first thread on the right is a front thread. Now, for the instructions I give you, you want the rightmost thread to be a back thread. If I turn the whole thing over, I still have not corrected that. The rightmost thread, it's still a front thread. I might have counseled you to set up your warp, making the figure of 8 move in the opposite direction, but I'm thinking to leave the warping instructions as they are, and we are going to work from right to left and then left to right, so we can start on the left side and work towards the right, and everything is fine. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to make the same structure. The first way tells you how to work using your right hand working across this way, and then you use your left hand using the same instructions working in the other direction. The first stitch on this 2-2 interlacing will happen on these 2 back threads, these 2. For the first stitch, I reach behind the first thread and I grab the second thread from behind. I bring it to the left, and it's now a front thread in my left hand. The other thread will now be a back thread on my left hand. From here on, I pick up the next back thread, look and see how it comes behind 2 other threads, and I put a front thread to the back. I pick up 1 thread, it comes behind 2 others, and the first of those 2 goes to the back. I pick up 1 and put 1 down. And the last stitch here is on these 2 remaining front threads. I reach behind the first thread and I grab the second of those 2. It comes around, it's a front thread in my left hand, and the last thread is a back thread. That's my first row, working left to right. Notice the stitches lean this way, S direction, and moving the threads from my right hand to my left hand. Holding the threads in my left hand, I now push the cross down, put in a safety string, and I get ready to work the next row, working the other direction. I'll be moving the threads from my left hand to my right hand. Row 2, I work the first stitch using these 2 back threads. I reach under the first thread and I grab the second thread of that pair and I bring it to the right. It's a front thread, up, down. Stitches now happen between 1 front and 1 back thread. I reach for the next back thread, bring it to the front in my right hand, and the front thread goes to the back. Pick 1 up, put 1 down. Pick 1 up, put 1 down. This leaves 2 front threads at the end of the row. I reach behind the first thread, I grab the second thread, it comes around to front position, and the other thread goes to the back position. You can see I've got this woven structure happening. While stitches in the first row leaned S-wise, the stitches in this row lean Z or Z-wise. The new cross, I'm going to push it down to the other side, push it down that way, put in a safety string, and we're ready to go again. I'm back to holding with my right hand and taking with my left. The first stitch will happen on 2 back threads, these two, and the last stitch is going to be on 2 front threads. So I pick up and put down, pick up and put down, pick up and put down. The next stitch is going to leave 2 front threads for the last stitch. Yeah, pick up and put down. And the last stitches on these 2 front threads, I pick up and put down. The new cross, I'm going to slide that down to the other side. And don't forget the safety string. Starting a new row, I check to see which side has a thread that goes around and to the back. This one is in front, this one is to the back, so I'm going to start working this direction. And I start with these 2 back threads, pick up, put down, pick up, put down, pick up, put down all the way across, and these last 2, pick up, put down. Not everybody can work equally with their 2 different hands. So for you, there is another kind of instructions. And these instructions have you always working in the same direction. The rightmost thread is in front, and we just finished a row where the stitches lean this way, S-wise. And now we need a row where the stitches lean this way, or Z-wise. We're going to start with these 2 front threads, and recross them this way. That means the left thread crosses over the thread to the right. I pick up this second thread and I cross it over, and it goes to the back in my right hand, and the other thread is a front thread in my right hand. I take the next front thread over and to the back, and a back thread to the front. I take a front thread to the back, notice it crosses over 2 threads, and I take a back thread to the front. Front to back to front. The last 2 threads are both back threads. I take the thread at the left over and down, and its partner comes to the front. Push that row down, and yes, that row had the threads crossing S-wise. For the next row, I need Z or Z crossings. Work the first stitch on these 2 back threads, and that is pick up and put down, pick up and put down, pick up and put down. And the last stitch here on 2 front threads, come around, pick up, and put down. And I push that row down. Now, sometimes it's difficult for me to keep track. Which row am I on? Until you develop the eye to see the pattern, and you can remember all these rules, it might be helpful to write yourself a few notes on 2 sides of the paper or a note card. I write notes for 1 row on this side of the paper. If the thread at the right is at the back, then instructions for that first stitch, work on 2 back threads, go behind the first thread, grab the second. And I repeat to myself, pick up, put down. On the other side of the paper, I write for the case that the first thread at the right is in the front position. I've got instructions for that. The first stitch will be on 2 front threads, taking the left thread over the right, and then the key words for that row, put down, pick up. Each time I start a new row, I first check the position of the rightmost thread. Ah, yes, this time it's in front, so yes, these are my instructions here. I read that the first stitch will use 2 front threads. Ah, yes, these 2 here. And the left thread goes over and down. Yes. And then I repeat the words, put down and pick up. So put down, pick up, put down, pick up, put down, pick up. The last stitch, if you want, you can write notes about this last stitch, cross over and pick up. And I shove down, and then I turn my paper over. And I check to make sure, yes, this first thread is at the back. So the instructions that the first stitch will happen on 2 back threads. Go under the first, pick up the second one. That's my first stitch. Then pick up, put down, pick up, put down, pick up, put down, and the last stitch here, pick up and put down. And there you go. Occasionally you want to have a look at the bottom. When you look at the bottom, you should see that, yes, we have the same weave structure happening at the bottom, and it looks very much so like what we've got at the top. And now we've arrived at the middle. You're seeking options, ways to finish off here, stabilizing the cloth. Let me show you how to use an extra piece of yarn to finish. A sideways piece of yarn is called a weft thread. I've selected a different color of yarn so you can better see what's going on. I'm going to put the loop that's the center of this extra piece of yarn into this space, the most recent shed. I slide it on through, just like that, and you want this yarn to go through, down, and back through again. I'll now work another row down the middle between the 2 sides of the loop. I can still slide my finger in the space, but it's getting tight. You can use a crochet hook. I've got a special tool called a nooking needle to help me. It's got a hook on one side and an eyelet on the other side. But a crochet hook can work just fine. I work another row. The first thread is at the back, so I work a stitch on 2 back threads. Pick up, put down. Then I pick up the next thread. I look up here to be sure I've snagged the correct thread. Yes. Up and down. I pick up the next back thread. I check to make sure it's okay, and down. Up and down. And the last stitch, pick up and put down. There you go. Another row done. And now you can see why I like this fancy tool, this nooking needle. I can put the ends through this eyelet on this side. This fancy tool makes it really easy for me because now I can just pull those through all the way through the last row. Now I snug up that weft, clean it up a little bit, and the work is sealed, nicely finished. And depending on conditions, you might work a couple more rows, each going between the last pair. In the end, I might tuck the ends back into the next to last row. Here I pass my fancy tool in the space of the next to last row, feed in that end, and I pull it through, and it's turned back on itself and nicely sealed. And here I've done that on both sides. We've got a nicely finished piece. I can clip the ends and call it done. And here's a neck scarf finished the same way. Here's where I joined the 2 ends, a row of chain stitches joining the loops from top and bottom. And at the center, the meeting place, I put in a weft line. It doesn't have the give that you have in the interlacing cloth, but it's a nice, clean finish. You've got a Mobius strip neck scarf. For more information on Sprang, check out my website, SprangLady.com.